Thanks for tuning in, everybody. My name is Joey Cappelletti, and I'd like to welcome founder and owner of Fake Shore Drive, Andrew Barber. How you doing this morning, Andrew?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, it's our pleasure. So, for those on the West Coast that might not be as familiar with Fake Shore Drive's influence, they are a hip hop blog showcasing what is going on in Chicago and the Midwest. Barber is often credited for the rise of Chicago's hip hop scene, and artists such as Chief Keef, Chance the Rapper, Lil Durk, Mick Jenkins, and many others. Andrew, you've often said before that you don't really consider yourself a journalist and more of a blogger, but as Fake Shore Drive has continued to evolve, you now write, manage, throw festivals, you have a radio show, you're even a bartender in the Miami video with Valet and Pusha T. How do you define what you are, and similarly what Fake Shore Drive is currently?
I don't even know how you put a title on it. It's like more so if you want to survive in the music business now as kind of like an entrepreneur, you got to wear, or just period, you got to wear like 10 different hats. So basically I have like 10 different jobs for one salary. If you work somewhere, like if you work at a label, yeah, you could do that. But even people that like have jobs like that typically have side hustles. Everybody in the music business is trying to do multiple things because it's good to have, number one, it's good to have multiple revenue streams, but it's also good to, broaden your network and broaden what you have going on. So I don't know what kind of title I would give myself. I just say entrepreneur.
Yeah. Do you enjoy all these different roles? I can imagine not having boundaries like a strict journalist might has its benefits, but it's also got to probably make some business decisions kind of difficult.
Not really. I mean, I like having that freedom. I know sometimes I do wear my journalism hat though. Like if I'm writing certain articles, like I will treat that as a journalist. Like typically, if I was gonna get approached to do something freelance for Complex or Vice or Fader or Red Bull, who's hired me to do editorial stuff in the past, I would approach that with more of a journalistic view. But just doing the blog, it would just vary. I think, what is that role now? What is the role of a journalist or a blogger or a talking head now? I mean, it's so many different things. So I never really wanted to place myself in that kind of box.
Yeah. One thing that really surprised me to learn is that you're actually from Indiana originally, which is, kind of surprising just with all your connections and the trust you've been able to gain. And for a lot of the listeners of this are kind of college age students that, have to move to cities for work and to start a career and make these new connections. How did you kind of get your foot in the door and start making these connections? And, what kind of advice maybe do you have?
I started from the absolute bottom. Like I didn't have any connections. I didn't know anybody. I was just a fan. I was going to these shows. I was going to events and meeting these artists, barely I was just a dude in the crowd. So it took a long time to build trust and to get my name out there. I think one of the first things I did was just, print up like 200 business cards. Like you could, this is like almost 15 years ago. So like you can get like 200, 300 business cards for like $15 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just went to like every single event that I could. Yeah. At night, I was working a full-time job. I just got out of college and I was working a 9-to-5 job. And, I would do that during the day where I'd have to get dressed up and, sit at a desk for, a whole day. And then at night I would go to rap events or, cultural events here in Chicago and just passed out my business card to everybody that I could. And at the time, like, it was such a foreign concept, at least here, for bloggers. Like, people weren't doing the online stuff really at the time. I think the goal, people were still selling CDs hand to hand. And I think the goal was to like try to get your songs on the radio or, not put your videos straight to YouTube, but try to get them, on 106 and Park or BT or MTV first before putting them on YouTube. I think people kind of looked at that like YouTube was like, a step down, like not necessarily the most professional way to go. So it was a learning curve for sure. But once I got in the door, I think people, uh, saw that my intentions were pure and I was doing a good job and I was working hard and I knew what I was talking about. I did good business. Like, I wasn't doing people dirty. I wasn't taking money for posts. I never took money for posts. I never, I really played it by the rules, in a way that maybe some of my peers didn't. And I think that, that earned respect. And then some of the OGs, my OGs, I guess, embraced me early on, like No ID, Trackster, people like that introduced me to other people. So, I met Twista that way and different people. So it's like, sometimes people will embrace you and you just got to move forward.
Do you think this grassroots approach kind of that you took, is that still possible in today's day and age?
Definitely. And I think it might even be more possible now than it was 5 years ago or maybe even 10 years ago. I was lucky enough to get in the blog world at a time where it was still new and it hadn't been oversaturated yet. It eventually got oversaturated. And I think, like, when I first started a blog, it wasn't even a cool thing. And that's why, like, whenever people say that, like, man, people are trying to get in the blog world, years later and stuff, and people would always have like it seemed like a cool thing to do, and it seemed like that's why so many people were doing it, because it was seen as a cool thing. But believe me, at the time in 2007, like, if you were a blogger, people kind of thought you were a nerd, and people were surprised. They were like, man, we thought you would be like a huge nerd, like a computer geek. Like, it wasn't cool to be online all day like it is now, especially like in the pandemic, It definitely was like frowned upon. You were seen like as a lesser person, like a computer nerd. And then obviously, the world has adjusted to that a lot different now. But yeah, dude, it was crazy, man. It was hard to get people to believe in that at the time, and for people to understand the concept because it was so foreign. But I was able to get in, and I was really the first person in Chicago blogging like that, covering the rap scene. And a lot of people followed years later, which is great. I'm glad, we were able to, blaze a trail. But there was, you got to give it up to the people who came before me who blazed the trail. But to answer your question, now you don't have to necessarily go through those certain gatekeepers or pay those dues that maybe you would have had to years ago. I think you can do everything from this supercomputer in your pocket that we're speaking on right now. I mean, you could put up something on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter, and it could go viral, in a matter of minutes, and then your life could change. So, there's really no rules anymore.
You kind of talked about this a little bit, but, being like that outsider, do you think coming into the scene as just a fan, and like you mentioned, and I've heard you in interviews kind of talk about, you had another job for even a while after you started the blog, correct? You had an advertising job?
Yeah, 5 years.
So do you think coming in like that, and no, you're good. Do you think coming in like that and kind of clear that you weren't just trying to exploit and make money off of these artists helped you gain trust in a community that, doesn't have a ton of, maybe white guys and, usually for Chicago, people that are from Chicago?
I mean, definitely 100%, because, my intentions were pure, and I think that's why people rocked with me and people gave me a pass and still do. If you're a white person working in hip hop, like, people are always going to be, not wary, but maybe like, all right, what are his intentions, And I think when I was younger, like, if you wanted to be a part of hip hop, and it was cool, like, it was very welcoming as far as like other races and stuff. But you had to, like, you had to be with it. Like, you couldn't, this wasn't just like a come up. Like, this was like, if you want to be a part of hip hop culture, you really got to be about it. You really got to study it. You got to know your stuff. You got to go harder than everybody. You have to have respect for it, and you have to know that you're a guest in the house of hip hop and treat it accordingly. And I feel like there's an issue now with a lot of people that don't, move by those same kind of practices. And I think that's definitely become an issue, and that's why you see a lot of backlash on people. But yeah, man, I came in the game as a fan, and it's not something I did to make money. I think, years later, more people got into the game because they knew they could make money. I never thought that you could really make much money, if at all, any money blogging. It took me years to make any money doing that. Like, It wasn't necessarily like right off the bat. Like I started killing it. Like I had to work a job to do this, and it was, a passion project that I was lucky enough to turn into a career.
In the past, some people have kind of criticized the platform that Fake Shore Drive has given certain artists, most often drill rappers, because of the message they push and the way they depict Chicago. If you want to talk about that generalization of drill rap, you can, but I'm kind of more interested. Do you think, for someone with your platform as a blogger and journalist, is it even your job to judge an artist's music and determine what is and isn't okay?
I mean, I think you have to use discretion, but like at the same time, like I was never promoting beef between artists. I think a lot of times people, if you're promoting fights and promoting videos of the beefs and stirring the pot, like I really never did that, or especially never intentionally did that. If there was coded things within the music that might have gotten by me, then that's one thing. And I'm not here to tell artists how to create their music or what they can and can't say. I don't believe in censorship, but I also don't believe in like me as a white person promoting like that kind of violence. But more so, I really just was a fan of the music, and I could tell what they were doing was groundbreaking, and I tried to cover it in a way that was like fair and balanced, and didn't try to promote the negativity that came along with it. But with drill, that cloud has kind of followed it, at least in Chicago, forever. But has been one of the most influential subgenres of rap in the past 15, 20 years. I mean, look at it; it's all over the world now. I mean, there's people doing it in different countries in Africa, the UK, New York. Like the drill scene blew up, and it became like this whole thing. But so I knew it was special, but I also knew that there was some things that came along with it. So I always treaded lightly when it came to that.
Yeah. On the No Jumper podcast and some other things, you've talked about meeting Chance for the first time, and you kind of talked about knowing he was something special, and I'm guessing you've had that kind of feeling with some artists, other artists as well. But I'm guessing it isn't like this every time. How do you go about separating the real potential from the thousands of music submissions that you get?
I mean, it's hard, but like sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. I mean, I think the goal is to be right more than you're wrong. But I have a pretty good track record. I mean, I think there's just ways if you approach this as a fan, as a lifelong fan, as I did, like, I've kind of been able to see what works and what doesn't. And sometimes you just got to pay attention to what the people want. It may not always be what you think is the best or you think is the greatest. And it may not even be your personal preference of the music or whatever. But like, is this something that the readers or the people are gonna want? And is there kind of like a magic behind it? Like I could tell just by the way people were reacting to, for example, Chance. Not only could I tell when he just walked in a room, and he would walk in the room and he could light it up, and you just like, okay, this guy's a star without having to do anything. It's just aura is there. Some people definitely have that. Not everybody has that. Some people got to work for it, but some people are willing to put in the work for years and years and years and years and just be resilient and never give up. Like I was super early on Freddie Gibbs before, maybe there was couple other sites covering him, like Smoking Section. Definitely nobody locally. Gary's close to Chicago, so I jumped on board with Gibbs early. Before they were even letting him in like nightclubs here. Like they would let him backstage to meet Bundy and the Cool Kids. Years ago. But that I don't think people maybe understood his music at first, but you could just tell that like, all right, this dude's super talented. He's really a dope rapper. He can make songs. He can, he's one of the best. And it took years for people to like, everywhere to catch on, but it did, So some people like it may not happen overnight. They have to work and work and work and work. And I think some of the artists that will last the longest and have the biggest footprint will be people that don't give up and just consistently work and don't want to be told no and just never give up.
Does kind of going off of that, does social media following account into, because you kind of talked about what the people think about an artist? Do you look at social media? Does that influence your decisions?
Yeah, I mean, not always. Like, if I think something's good, I don't care if you have 100 followers or 100,000 followers. You know, if you can look at that and kind of tell if somebody's going to be able to scale or how big their buzz is, like right now. Of course, I mean that's an indicator. Anybody can see that, but talent isn't always based on numbers.
You're listening, you're listening to, obviously, like we've said, a ton of music every day for, submissions. And then, when you go to concerts, obviously not right now, but you're going to concerts kind of as a job and getting approached everywhere you go. Do you miss not really being able to be that fan kind of as much anymore?
Definitely, and that's why I like, over the past the past year and a half, I changed my approach to how I was listening to music and how I was consuming it and how I was being a part of it. I mean, I miss that aspect of it. So I started approaching things differently of how I became a fan. I think I tweeted something like this recently. Like, I stopped trying to listen to everything that came out, instead focusing on, certain things that I like, that I know that I will probably like or be into, and spending a lot of time with it and digesting it, as opposed to just trying to listen to everything, even if I'm not necessarily into it. And then trying to move away from some of the distractions of, because I don't think you can really consume an album or digest it the way that it was meant to if you're sitting on your phone scrolling, or you're on your computer looking stuff work. Like, some of that stuff's hard. Like, you really need to sit with it sometimes. Take a walk or run or work out or whatever. Or you miss stuff, and I think I wanted to pay attention to stuff more. So I kind of had just changed my approach to be more like a fan.
Yeah. How is, obviously, the big question from everyone is how COVID has kind of changed, different businesses and online platforms. And especially for you, it seems like a lot of what you do is pretty grassroots, in-person stuff. How have you been changing and evolving during COVID?
I mean, it's been a huge change. Obviously I've had to redo my whole business model. I relied heavily on live shows and events, and I consulted for different companies that were doing events or doing in person. There were things that you had to do in person, stuff that really you can't do on a Zoom call. So that changed a lot. So I started focusing on other things that I knew that I could do from home, or, that type of spot. So it's been a big change. And, I think in music, it's about survival, right? It's not about, I think some people get lucky and they can blow up overnight. It obviously doesn't happen for a lot of people. And I think so many people think that this is an overnight thing, but it takes years. And also for me, it's about longevity. It's about the long game. I don't think being around for 13 years feels like a long time, but to you, would you say that's a long time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That to you, that's like a long time, but when you're in it, that doesn't feel like 13 years is a long time. But 13 years is it is a long time. So to stay in the game that long, it's difficult. Most people don't last 3 or 5 years. So, I think you need to move based on that. Do I want to make this a career, or is this just like a quick lick, so to speak?
Yeah, do you have an answer for that? Because it seems like, to me, what kind of what has evolved a ton is, I'm seeing you do a lot of, you're doing these YouTube video interviews now. You talked about kind of the radio that you're doing. Is that kind of, are you constantly trying, not to hit this ceiling and constantly?
You have to evolve. You got to be able to pivot. The music industry changes every few years anyway. And so you have, when I was blogging, I knew that was about to change and stop and be a completely different thing, because everybody was saying, oh, you got to pivot to video. Facebook set that off. And so the whole industry started saying you got to pivot to video. So everybody started changing their editorial. People started getting fired, and journalism changed because of that decision. So you had to be, I saw that coming. I saw the writing on the wall. So that's why I started expanding and doing other things. Luckily I started working with Red Bull, and I was able to start doing shows and concerts and events, thankfully all over the world with them. But, even when you do that and you work with a client like that, and we had a good 5-6 year relationship, but even that, you have to know that all right, this is eventually going to come to an end because nothing lasts forever. So you always have to be, try to at least stay 3-4 steps ahead, and be able to pivot when the time is needed.
Kind of off of that, what do you think? What do you think about what like Cole Bennett and Lyrical Lemonade are doing in Chicago?
It's cool, man. I'm happy for them. I think they're super tapped in with the younger generation, and they've been able to really, take what we kind of built and different people that were around in the early days and just turn it into something else and like really, turn it into a multimedia company and go crazy with it. So, it's dope.
I'm interested, in 2013, you wrote, you and some others for Complex listed Common's "I Used to Love Her" as the greatest Chicago rap song. Does this still stand true today for you?
You know what? I wrote that actually probably 10, 11 years ago, but then they redid it in 2013 after Chance blew up and like the drill thing happened because they went in and redid it. But my original piece, yeah, I still think that. I would still say that. I mean, that can be debated for sure, but it is certainly up there. Like if it's not number one, it's definitely top 5.
Yeah.
What do you think? Let me ask you that.
I mean, I got to be honest. I had to go listen to it. I've heard Common obviously before, but I had to go. That for me. I think on here like you guys had like Jesus Walks at like number 3. So that kind of stuff, for me, and like, even though I was young, like Chief Keef was obviously really, really huge. And so like a lot of his songs are still, for me, that's kind of what I look at a lot of Chicago rap. And I honestly really do enjoy, I'm a huge fan of Mick Jenkins, Femdot, a lot of those guys right now too, and really like what they're doing kind of with the music scene in Chicago right now too.
Yeah, and I mean, look, everybody has different opinions on what they think is number one, but that was a very impactful record. You weren't even born yet. You weren't born until 5 years after that song came out. So, yeah. Of course, that's not going to resonate the way with you. But that was a song I think that really kicked the doors down for what was what was happening in Chicago hip hop. That might even be the first big song from Chicago rap that made it on MTV and BET and things like that. I mean, I think Twista when he was still Tongue Twister, was getting some play, but like I Used to Love Her was a rap hit at least.
Yeah. I just have seen so many of your interviews and have seen heard you talk about so much Chief Keef, Lil Durk, a lot of these other guys, and just kind of that come up, and I've kind of shared that on some of our platforms, and I think that's kind of how your career and how Chicago hip hop came up kind of at the same time is extremely fascinating and really good listen. But kind of right now, I kind of listed some of the more recent rappers. What do you think about the current scene in Chicago and the direction it's kind of going?
I think it's great, and I think a lot of times, like, you ask me about Lyrical Lemonade and stuff, and I'm like, that's the youth, that's the next generation. Those people that are over there, they're like 15 years younger than me, or more. Those are the people that are kind of like in control. Like a lot of the stuff, I think it's great. I like the music. I love what they're doing to push the city and the culture forward. But sometimes I got to step, away. I always stay in tune with it, but sometimes I got to, step away and let the youth drive that. And it seems like, people are doing a pretty good job with it. It's fascinating to me where, guys that I gave their first blog posts and first concerts and first cosigns to, like Dirk and Herb, are flourishing still. They're doing great. Like, yeah. Dirk is having his breakout moment. It's probably the hottest, him. I would say, you got Polo G and Dirk and Herb. Those are probably the 3 hottest artists in the city right now on the rap scene. And then Juice WRLD, rest in peace, but he was a comet. He was an anomaly. Like, you don't get an artist like that every few years. He really resonated with the people. So it's great to see that, this is still rocking and stars are still emerging, and like a guy like Dirk can really get his get his moment 8 years in. Most artists don't last 8 years; they don't last 3 years. So that's been cool to see, and it's just exciting because I remember in 2012 when the drill stuff took off and Chance and Vic Mensa and those guys really started blowing up. Like, people would tell me, "Yo, enjoy your moment because you're gonna have a year and Chicago will go back to obscurity or whatever." And it just never went back. It always stayed relevant, always stayed hot. Chicago's influenced some of the the most popular genres in music right now. So it's fun to watch, and it's fun to be a part of the legacy.
Do you have some, for the West Coast kids out here, do you have some rising Chicago and Midwest artists that you think we should be listening to?
I think you probably know the Chicago ones. There's personal people that I like that, I don't necessarily how big they're gonna get. There's this kid named Judy that I think is dope that I've been playing a lot. Brittany Carter's dope and it seems to be getting some traction. Check out the new Chicago playlist that I do for Apple Music. I've been curating that playlist for Apple for the past 3-4 years. Which has been great. It's been great to be a part of that, and I still, keeps me fresh, keeps my ear to the street, and there's a lot of dope talent on that. So you should definitely check that out. But for sure, as far as the Midwest, Detroit's got it right now, in my opinion. So pay attention to that market.
Well, I want to thank Andrew for being here with us today. If you'd like to learn more about Andrew Barber and Fake Shore Drive, you can follow him on Instagram and Twitter at Fake Shore Drive. There's also a website with a lot of his pieces and the history of Fake Shore Drive. So thanks everyone for tuning in today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.